Alright, so in this lecture, we will see the steps to convert the existing Redux code into the Redux toolkit. So the very first step we will see is creating a slice. Let's just visualize first what is a slice and how does it look. So now you see that we have already defined the product reducer like this, which has the data, products, cart and total, and we have the reducer function in which we have defined actions, and each action has some way to change the state. Now if we go with the Redux toolkit, then this is not the way we are going to follow. So what I will do is I will convert this product reducer file into product slice. In fact, I'm going to create a slice. So what is a slice? Basically, a slice contains the state, the initial state data, that is. Also, it contains all the reducers, all the functions, the actions which we have defined as reducers inside it. So more or less, the slice will look something like this, where we have the name of the slice, we have the initial state where we define whatever data we want, which we initialize. Then we have the reducers key, in which, for example, here if you see that I have defined purchase. Now this purchase and delete item, they become the actions, but they are action creators inside this slice. So we have the data, the state data, and we also have all the action creators defined with various method names. So purchase and delete item, they become the actions. Also, every function has the state and action passed in it, the way we have seen in the previous coding as well, like you see here. In fact, it's also possible that you avoid action. This action is optional, but if we have the actions defined, if we have the dispatch, certainly we will have this action here. So at the moment, both purchase and delete item will need action because we are going to pass the payload. So I keep it as it is. So that's why I have kept it, but otherwise it can be like this, where we have just the state. So that's also possible. Ideally, the syntax of create slice is like this, where we say const, then the object, the slice object, that is. We use the create slice method, and that has an object literal defined with various keys. So here the first key is name, where you define whatever name you want. It's just a string. Then you have the initial data, where you define the initial state, where you actually initialize the state values. And then you have the reducers, that is the reducer functions, that is basically the actions you define in it. Internally, the create slice uses create action and create reducer methods. So the created reducer and actions you can export at the end. For example, in this case, you can export the purchase and delete item with saying product slice dot actions, because the product slice is the object we created with create slice. So that will have all the actions, and we are destructuring those actions in the respective items, that is purchase and delete item. So this purchase and delete item later we can import wherever we want to, and then you actually export the reducer also. So the product slice object does have the reducer, because the create slice, as I mentioned, uses create reducer method internally. So we have the actions and reducers which we export at the end. This is just an idea how we deal with the creating a slice. Now without wasting time, let's convert both the product reducer and login reducer into slices respectively. So the first thing is I'm going to go to the product reducer. So the first thing is I need to import the create slice. So I'll say import create slice from Redux.js toolkit. Now this init data I'm going to keep as it is, but this function we don't need anymore. But at the moment I'm keeping it as it is, so that we'll copy few things from this place. But let me first of all say const product slice, that's the slice I'm going to create. Let me also rename this product reducer to product slice. I'll say rename and product slice. Let me also rename this login reducer as well. I'll right click, rename, and login slice.js. Perfect. So now we have both the files renamed. Now coming back to the product slice, I'll say const product slice is equal to create slice. Now I'm going to open the curly bracket. Let me press enter. Here the very first thing is I need to create the name of the slice. So I'll say product. Now here I want to define the initial state. Initial state, I'll define this init data which we already have here. Now instead of this, I can name this as initial state. That's also fine. In that case, we will have initial state is equal to initial state. But with the help of ES6 syntax, you don't need to write both the things simultaneously. So you just can say that initial state. This is equivalent to initial state equals to initial state. So this is a better way to write. So now we have this initial state object. Now I'm going to list out the reducer. So first of all, I'll say reducers colon, open the curly bracket, and I press enter. Now here, the very first I want to define is purchase. I'll say colon. I'll open the bracket, and here I'll say state and action and have an arrow, and I'll open the curly brackets. Now important point here is earlier we had this code where we had this state, that is the original state, we keep it, then we try to update the new state. That's what we do. With the Redux toolkit, you do not need to worry about mutability. It doesn't mean that Redux toolkit does not implement immutability. In fact, it does. Behind the scene, it does. But as a developer, you do not have to worry. You can write the code directly. Immutability of the state will be managed by the Redux toolkit. Let me show you one clipping from the official site. If you observe, it says that the Redux toolkit allows us to write mutating logic in reducers. That means you are allowed to write the code. As I mentioned, that it appears that you are directly changing the state, but it does not actually mutate the state because it uses the immer library, which detects changes to a draft state and produces a brand new immutable state based off those changes. So even though you will be writing the state changes directly, but internally immer will take care of it. So let's just do that. I'll just copy these two lines now. I won't copy this ... state. I'll just copy this and paste it here. Now instead of cart, I'll say state.cart because the state I'm going to change directly. And I'll remove this colon because now I'm not in the object literal, it's a function. So I'll say equal to. And then I'll say state.total, again equal to. That's it. I also want to change one more thing here. The action.payload. Here you see that there is a capital L, but that was the payload defined by us. Now this payload will also be passed by the Redux toolkit. So I'll have to change this capital L from small l. So everywhere I'll do that. I'll just change this L. And here also. The next item I'm going to add is the delete item. I will not keep it delete because delete is a keyword. So I'll say delete item state comma action. Now again I'll come back here. I'll copy these lines and paste it here in the delete item. I'll say small l. And here also I'll say small l. Alright, so now we have defined the slice. The next step is we need to export the actions and also the reducer. So at last I'll say export const. Now here I'm going to destructure the purchase and delete item, these two. So purchase comma delete item equals to product slice dot actions. And the next is I'm going to export the default product slice dot reducer. As I mentioned that the create reducer and create action is being executed by the create slice. So we can export the actions and reducer like this. So product slice object will have the actions and reducer defined in it. So we are done with the product slice. Let's go to login slice again. Here also I'm going to say import. We don't need actions to import. I'll say import create slice from Redux.js toolkit. This also I can say initial state. Now I'm going to say const login slice is equal to create slice, open the curly bracket, then name colon The slice name I keep login, initial state, comma, so I don't need anything else. Then I'll say reducers, colon, and open a curly bracket. Now here I'm going to define user login action. So I'll say user login, colon, then state, comma, action. And inside this, let's copy this line. It's a small line, but still I'll copy it, paste it, and then I'll say state dot login det is equal to action dot login detail. Here we don't need payload because I have not passed any object. I've just passed a string, so directly it will be passed to this login detail. And the last step is we are going to export the constant user login is equal to login slice dot actions, and I'll say export default login slice dot reducer. So now we are done with defining slices. Ideally, you create the store first and then you define the reducer. But here we already had some code, so we converted it, and then we are going to go to defining the store. So in the next lecture, we'll see how we create the store with a method called configure store. Now let's talk about relative questions. The first is, what is a Redux state slice and how do you create it? So basically, when we are dealing with reducers and actions inside a normal Redux, when it comes to Redux toolkit, we create a separate slice, a slice which contains an object, and we use the create slice method like this. And there are a few parameters which we pass where we give the name, the initial state, and the reducers. So basically, create slice helps you to create the reducer and actions with a single object and in easier way. The second question is how the immutable state is managed in spite of direct state change inside a slice reducer. So here I would like to attach this reference which I mentioned earlier, that it appears that you are directly changing the state, but it does not actually mutate the state because it uses the immer library which detects changes to a draft state and produces a brand new immutable state based off those changes.